What makes a great SharePoint intranet? Now, I've been building SharePoint intranets for the past 10 years, and I can tell you there's a number of things that you should be thinking about to kind of get the best experience possible for your SharePoint intranet. Now, what I tend to do is I try and start off by talking to my customers about thinking about finding balance within your SharePoint intranet. Now, everybody's intranet is going to be different, and there's going to be different needs that you're going to take into consideration. However, you do need to be thinking about everything on a kind of scale of one end of an extreme to the other. So the first thing to find the right balance of is the functionality and the aesthetics. Now, what I mean by this is that you are going to see some intranets which are heavily functionality driven. They're very navigation heavy. There's a lot of buttons. There's a lot of things on the page, a lot of information that you're trying to cram into people's faces. They're very functionality heavy. Sometimes this can lead to it not being very aesthetic. Now, on the other end of the spectrum is you could have an intranet which is very aesthetic, as it has a lot of images, has a lot of sliders, a lot of videos, things like that, but it's not truly meeting the functionality needs of the end user. So you have to weigh this up and find the right point on this scale that's going to meet your users' expectations. We've also got to think about the manual versus automation scale. Now, what I mean by this is how much time is it going to take you to create and maintain new content? Where is that content going to be coming from? Are you personally going to create it? Is your team going to create it? Is content going to be created from individual departments around the organization? Are you going to pull in content automatically from other third-party areas? So you need to think about what content is going to exist and what content is going to be manually created versus what is going to be automated. As in, not just necessarily having systems automatically pull data and news articles from third-party websites, but it could be that you're thinking from an automation point of view that you are getting new content coming from different areas of the organization. The next thing to consider is the navigation versus search. Now, how everybody finds a document is going to be completely different. So let's say, for example, we take a user who's looking for the, say, annual leave holiday entitlement. He's planning on going on a nice sunny holiday somewhere, and he wants to know how much holiday he can actually take in a particular year. Now, this comes down to actually how each user will find content. Some people will want a navigation bar, and this is where things like mega menu drop downs, where you have the top level navigation, where you can see maybe things like policies or quick links or applications that people want to use. And then underneath them, or even it could be a bar that says departments, and then underneath them, you have, for example, under departments, maybe human resources, and there's a third layer down from that. You have, say, for example, policies, and people can go there and find, say, the annual leave holiday policy through a navigational sort of way. There could be other buttons that you find throughout the intranet. Buttons like policies on the actual intranet homepage is very popular and quite common to see. But then again, you can have people that are going to use the search bar. So you can have people using search across the top and typing in things like holiday, annual leave, policies, things like that to find the same type of content. So you need to make sure that your documents are well tagged, well structured, so people can find both through the navigation bar, but also the search bar. Now, a third way that I want to talk about that a lot of people will soon be finding documents through is via sort of AI chatbots. Now, this comes through the what we call Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. And you can use Copilot now to search SharePoint sites. So previously where you might have searched for, say, annual leave policy, but actually it's called holiday policy, you might have struggled to find it. Whereas actually using Copilot inside of SharePoint, it's going to be very confident that it's going to find basically that policy because it understands the context of what the user is searching for and not just looking specifically for a document which is called annual leave policy as an example. So you need to think also about how much content you're going to be generating. Now, this really impacts the design of a SharePoint site. Because let's take, for example, with news, you need to kind of reverse engineer how many news articles you're expecting to see on your intranet homepage. Because let's say, for example, if you're going to only create a news article once a month, then if you were to display 12 news articles on your intranet homepage, it means that you're going to have news articles there for 12 months, and it's going to make your intranet feel very stagnant, very old, very dated, Whereas actually, if say for example you knew you were only going to be creating a news article once a month, maybe just show 3 news articles on the homepage, and then that way at least you know that news articles are only showing for 3 months, and on the 4th month it's going to fall off, and people can always get access to those news articles. They can always go and see them afterwards in an archive area, but you don't necessarily need to be presenting it to them. The reason I say this is because imagine, let's take that example where you're only creating 1 news article a month and you're displaying 12. You're going to be kind of in August and still seeing news articles from the Christmas party that happened 8 months before. So it's going to feel very dated. I've seen so many intranets make this mistake before, and it very quickly makes the intranet look boring, outdated, and people feel like they can't trust things which are outdated, or if they've seen the information multiple times, they'll quickly get bored, and your engagement rates will plummet because people will no longer want to go and access that SharePoint intranet. So as I say, reverse engineer this. Think about, where is the content coming from? Are you going to create the content? Are your team going to create the content? Or are other areas of the business going to be creating content and feeding that through? The other thing I would think about when you're reverse engineering is that you'll find when you're first launching a new intranet, people are very keen, people want to help, people want to support, and they'll probably overcommit to what actual content they can provide. So again, with your SharePoint design, think about this. Maybe almost, if people are saying that you're going to get, say, 5 news articles a month, maybe just factor in that in reality, once this is all calmed down, you're probably only going to get 2, 3. So factor that into your design as well when you're thinking about how much news articles there are. It's always better to have a really fresh looking intranet homepage with loads of news articles which are constantly coming in and changing, and people feeling almost like they're missing out by not going there and seeing these news articles. So actually, this is going to drive engagement. People are going to want to go there. People are going to want to see the latest news articles. So let's jump in and take a little look around what a typical intranet homepage looks like. So this is a typical kind of intranet homepage. And as I say, we would typically see things like a hub navigation bar across the top, which is going to help us with our kind of navigational purposes, where people prefer to click on things. And we can see here on this drop down, we've got, for example, applications, and then we've grouped our apps by certain topics. So for example, we've got an employee portal area. So we've got things like employee starter forms. We've got our control documents area. So for our quality control, our ISO 9001, our policy trackers, things like that, all grouped under certain categories. Further down on the homepage, you can see we're trying to balance here, and I would say this particular layout is probably slightly leaning more towards a functionality scale. When we're looking on the functionality versus aesthetic scale, this is leaning much more towards the kind of the functionality side of things, because we've got a lot of navigational items here. You can see we've got what we call the hero web part up at the top, which we can easily change the background images, we can change the text and the link of where they're linking to. These could link to both internal resources, so things like SharePoint pages, files, folders, documents, other SharePoint sites, or it could link to things externally as well. So if we wanted it to link out to third-party sort of payroll systems, or sales CRM systems, or news websites, whatever it is, you might want to link to other third-party applications. And you can do this with any of these navigation options, not just this hero tile. You could do it across the top, or you could use what we call our quick links web part on the right-hand side. Now, the quick links web part, as I say, you can specify the text, you can specify the icons which sit next to it, and you can either use Microsoft stock icons, or you can even upload your own icons as well if you wanted to. And these typically link to kind of systems, apps that your organization is using. Something else pretty cool that I've seen people do recently is that they changed this, rather than saying our systems or our apps or quick links, it maybe almost starts it with a question. So it says, how do I, and then ... And then these quick links are actually answers to or they are the questions essentially. So it might be, how do I, and then rather than control documents, it says find policies, and then you click on that and you go through to our control documents, which is our policies area. Or how do I book, and then rather than desk booking, it says book a desk in the office, and then you click on that and it takes you through to our desk booking app. So there's a couple of different ways you could approach this, and I would suggest that you potentially think of A/B testing this. So when you're building out your intranet, have a bit of a pilot group that looks at this, have 2 different versions of your SharePoint homepage, one with this kind of direct route, just saying what it is. It's an onboarding system, it's a desk booking system, and maybe have another version of it, an A/B test, which is talking about these are questions and answers that people are clicking through to. Further down, now this is actually a bespoke web part that we've built, and it's worth knowing that actually you can build your own web parts in SharePoint, or if you wanted to, companies like Valto, we often help build bespoke web parts as well for SharePoint Intranets when there's web parts which maybe aren't quite meeting your expectations, and we need to basically bridge a requirements gap by building something specific. So in this example, we can see we've built something which is showing kind of pop-up notifications. It's showing where we've got, say, things like we're giving alerts, local road closures. So recently at Valto, we had the road which was right next to our office completely shut by police, and we wanted to let everybody know on our intranet that the road was actually closed, and diversions were in place and things like that. So you can see we can have a little pop-up message here for people. Further down, we've got our news. Now, as I said before, we've got to balance this. We've got to get this right. If you don't have loads of content, don't use a layout like this. So we're showing here, we've got 6, so 12. We've got 12 different articles. As I say, if we're creating one a month, this will get very boring very quickly. But say, for example, if we're creating one every day or every other day or something like that, we'll quickly fill this up. And what we're saying is one a day doesn't mean that you're creating it one a day, but maybe if you're looking at content across the organization. So say, for example, here you can see this is our hub. So our intranet homepage is often referred to as a hub inside of SharePoint. And this is our intranet homepage. So any news articles which are tagged with hub, we know has come from our intranet homepage. Whereas we can see other departments are also creating news articles. So you can see here, for example, human resources have created an article, finance have created an article, information technology or IT department have created their own article, and it's pulling up from their site. And in fact, actually, if I was to go on to the IT site, I would see a summary of only news articles that have been created from their site. But they're all pulling up, they're all rolling up to our intranet homepage. We can also see things like local time, local weather. Now, this is fantastic, especially for enterprise level companies who are operating all over the world. Maybe you don't necessarily have offices yourself, but you probably have customers that are in each of these different areas. So again, people going onto the internet can get the local time, but also things like the local weather for certain regions of the world that you're working with. And again, I mean, it's a very British thing, this, but you might start off your phone calls with people in other offices or customers that are around the world with, how's the weather? But actually, you already kind of know this. So you can say, oh, I can see actually it's really hot at the moment. So I'm speaking to a colleague or a customer in Tokyo and saying, actually, it's really hot. I can see you're probably having a heat wave there at the moment, are you? So it gives you kind of a little bit of fuel for kind of conversations and things like that. Further down, we've got things like upcoming events. So we can scroll through these and we can see latest upcoming events. And again, this can pull from multiple areas of your intranet. Often intranets are made up of different business units, departments, or topic areas, and you could have events around them. So say, for example, you've got a training area or training department, like a learning development department. Maybe they have their own SharePoint site, and maybe they have events for SharePoint training, Power Apps training, things like that, which are coming up, and we can roll them up onto our intranet homepage. Further down, we've got things like this call to action web part, which is fantastic for sort of linking off to maybe a feedback form. Maybe it's built in Microsoft Forms, but it could be built in any other third-party application as well. As long as it's got a URL, you can jump directly to it. But this could be a feedback form for things like the intranet, but I've also seen things like feedback for recent benefits or schemes that have been kind of launched internally and you wanted to get a bit of feedback from the business. I've also seen things like whistleblowing forms, like anonymous kind of feedback forms and things like that to raise issues and that sort of thing. I've seen those linked from the intranet homepages in the past before. Also, it's very important to be thinking about videos, so we can embed videos from YouTube directly. So there is a native integration between YouTube and SharePoint, so you can integrate your videos from YouTube directly into there. But you could also embed them from things like other third-party platforms or Microsoft Stream, for example. You can embed those videos. And again, it's going to be really important to get the kind of content right inside of your SharePoint Intranet to keep that engagement level high. So we talked a little bit briefly before about navigation, but navigation is really important. In fact, I found this quote that said, navigation is the key to exploring the uncharted, the gateway to discovery, and the path to understanding. Now, this is obviously a little bit cheesy, but I think it raises a really good point. And I'm just talking a little bit about that everyone will find things differently. But what you want to make sure of is that you're thinking about how is this kind of user journey, basically for each of these kind of core areas like policies, procedures, maybe marketing materials, forms, templates, things like that people want to access. How are they going to access them? Again, you could also A/B test this with a couple of different pilot groups. Ask them, would you use the search bar? Would you use navigation options? If you were to use navigation options, what would you choose? You can also think about, there's no right or wrong answer to this as well, to be honest, but in terms of duplicating links. Now, what I mean by this is you might find that there's the same link across the top navigation bar as there is within a quick links web part or the hero tiles. Now, some people don't like to duplicate links because they want to just have one user journey that they point everyone towards. Now, again, that's fine to a certain extent. The benefits of that is, if, say, for example, that link was to ever change, you've got to remember where was it linked to and make sure you're updating all those different links and things like that. But that's very rare, to be honest, that happens. But if you were to duplicate links, as in having a link in the top navigation bar, but also on the home page, in the quick links bar, things like that, you're increasing the chances that people are going to find your content. Now, you can see there's actually an area inside of SharePoint pages where you can see analytics. You can see how many people have accessed a specific page. So if I just jump into that as like a little example for you. So you can actually see here across the top, we've got this analytics button, but this is on every single SharePoint page, by the way. It's not just your home page. And you can click on this and it will show you a very short summary of analytics. Basically, page views by the last 7 days, 30 days, 90 days, average time that's spent on a page, and also the page traffic by time. So basically per day, per time, what's the most highest traffic. But use this in combination of when you're planning your navigation, think about using this analytics to actually track, are people landing on the SharePoint pages? If they're not, maybe look at adding the links to these pages into other areas of your intranet, not just in the top navigation bar, but maybe add a button onto your intranet homepage if it's really important information that you need to make sure that people are accessing frequently. It's worth thinking as well that eyes naturally go to the top right corner of a screen and then to the left and then down. So it's almost like an upside down L shape. So again, thinking about kind of that navigation, where on the page are things sitting and where are people going to primarily have their focus. We've got two different navigation bars at the top of our screen. So let me just jump back and show you this. So back on our screen up here, so you can see this is what we refer to as our hub navigation bar. So this is just kind of one, we're only using one navigation bar as an example here. But you can also have what they call a site navigation bar, which basically is a secondary navigation bar underneath this. So as I say, in this example, not a great example because we don't actually have both links on here. We just have our hub navigation bar. But maybe if I was to jump into our compliance site, you can see now we've got our hub navigation bar across the top, but then we have this area here which we call our site navigation bar. Now the difference is across the top, our hub navigation bar is designed to be consistent throughout the intranet. So if I was to jump to a different department site, say for example I jump into my finance site now, you'll see this navigation bar across the top up here stays exactly the same, but actually in theory, I know, great, not a great example, but this site navigation is specific to the current site we're looking at, so it can be different. So these links here should really relate to the content on this specific site. So this is our finance department site, so these links should really be specific to that finance site. We have things like our highlighted content web part. So this could be actually pulled through content from different areas of our intranet. We also have, say, that call to action web part. So if I just jump back to our homepage here. So I say there's loads of areas that we could be using navigation. Heroes, quick links, things like that. Call to action web parts. These are all navigational based web parts which we can easily jump around to. We can also use things like images as the ability to actually as a navigation bar. So we could put images on the page rather than actually just purely just text. And as I say, review all of the kind of the navigation that you're using with that kind of analytical page tool to see where your traffic is going and when. Now, the next thing to think about when you're designing a fantastic SharePoint intranet is communication and the communication best practices for a SharePoint intranet. So good communication on an intranet fosters transparency, boosts employee engagement, and streamlines information sharing across the organization. So as I said, a newsfeed is crucial for employee engagement. This is where you're going to see the latest information pulling through. Now, on the intranet example I was showing you before, we just had one newsfeed, but you could technically have multiple newsfeeds that are broken down by different topics. Now, actually, this screenshot I'm showing you here is from what we refer to as a news hub. So very large organizations and enterprises that have a lot of different news feeds often just consolidate this into a specific SharePoint site which has loads of different news based on different topics. So it might be, say, for example, we have CEO updates, so messages, updates which are coming from the C-suite, which are being displayed as news items. Maybe we could even do things like filtering news articles for the user based on what country they work in, or what job title they have, or what department that they work in. So say, for example, I work in the UK, so my country settings is going to be set to the UK, so it's only going to pull through news articles which are related to the UK, offices based in London or Manchester or places like that. Maybe my department set to IT, so again, based on the configuration settings of my profile, it knows I work at the IT department, so it's going to filter and only show me news articles which are related to the IT department. So there's so many different ways that you could slice and dice up the information inside of SharePoint news feeds. This provides real-time updates and announcements, and it keeps your employees informed about key goings-on and announcements around your organization. It encourages knowledge sharing as well, so it means that people are more likely to see what's going on, updates, key information than they possibly wouldn't have been doing before the intranet was launched. You can also reduce duplication, and it increases productivity. And the news web part can be displayed in many different ways. So actually, on this example here, everything you see here is actually a news web part. This is just displayed as a carousel. This is displayed as kind of an itemized list, and this one's showing kind of the top priority one. So it's showing the latest news article in a much larger icon than the rest of the news articles that have previously gone before it. You can see we've got this see all button, which is next to all of the news web parts as well. So as news articles are added, the old ones get dropped off. Depending on how many you're saying that are going to be displayed on the page, we can customize that. So maybe we might just have the latest CEO updates, and everything else drops off the page. Or in this case, we're showing the latest 3. But essentially, once you say, for example, if we were to say we're going to show 3 news articles, when the 4th news article is added, the oldest news item is then going to be dropped off of that display. You can also choose to manually, if you wanted to, this is a bit more detailed, but you can manually go and drag around news items as well. So if there's one you always wanted to make sure is at the top of the list, you can manually configure that as well if you wanted to. You can get news items to pull basically everything. So for a newsfeed could pull all news items from every single newsfeed that it finds that user has access to. Or you could just be very specific to say only pull from CEO updates. You could choose multiples. You could say pull from CEO updates and finance updates and this and that, and you can create a multitude of this. Or you could just say based on user. Now, this is a bit of a kind of dark art, bit black magic, because you don't really have control over this. You will let SharePoint kind of define, based on the user's activity of SharePoint, what news items it thinks is relevant to the user. Again, I would pilot this. This works very differently for many different organizations. So I would pilot this and just see what works best for your organization. You can use metadata filters. So as I say, you can audience target by country, by job role, by department, and so much more. There's probably other ideas you can think of that you would want to tag against users. And you can drive traffic via email as well with newsletters. So just to show you how simple this is, if I just go into my news area inside of SharePoint. So basically, when you come to post something, you can either send an email. So let's just go and create a brand new one. News post. Let's create a brand new news item. So let's call it SharePoint Training Success. Now, I'm not going to put too much into it because it's just a demo I just wanted to show you. But you can see here now it says post and send. So now with every news item, or you can go in select multiple if you wanted to, you have the option now of sending an email to a group of people or individual people to basically tell them that there is a new news article. Now, I would say this isn't something that you probably want to use forever, but it's a fantastic way that you can transition people who are probably currently getting their news via email. So you're probably sending newsletters or PDFs to people already. But you can actually use these types of features to basically send snippets to people, say, hey, there's a news item in SharePoint, and they go, oh, this sounds interesting. And then they've got the option of viewing the full article inside of SharePoint, so they can jump directly into that, and you're increasing your traffic to your SharePoint site. And again, with communication, it's not just news items. We've got event web part, so we can communicate key dates, events, training, all sorts of things like that that people can add directly into their own calendar from an events web part. So we've looked at how to find a balance to create a fantastic SharePoint intranet. But what about designing for high engagement? So actually getting people to keep coming back and returning and engaging with your SharePoint intranet. Well, there's a video linked above that is going to go through that into more detail with you, so go and check that out next.